Essential School Age IEP module is presented in three separate parts, focusing on the development, writing, and implementation of the Individualized Education Program, the IEP. Once a district has determined that a student requires a specialized program based upon the student's response to a scientifically based intervention program and subsequent evaluation assessment process, they have 30 calendar days to hold a meeting to develop an initial IEP. Once the parent signs the initial IEP and the district has provided the parent with a PRO1, prior written notice, the district will begin providing services based upon the individual needs of the student. The IEP is active for not more than 364 days from the date the IEP was agreed upon and signed by a qualified IEP team. At least once a year, the IEP team will be required to meet unless the child turns 22 years of age, tests out of services, receives a diploma, or the parent revokes consent for services. On the cover page of the IEP, it is important to ensure that the district information presented is complete and accurate. Much of the information on the cover page will become part of the Education Management Information System EMIS records that districts must submit for annual reporting. Please be attentive to the date of the meeting and the type of the meeting being held. One of the most misunderstood areas on the cover page is in the box labeled IEP Timelines, where it indicates the date of the next IEP review. This is not the date of the annual IEP meeting, but rather a date for the IEP team to review the contents of the IEP. Some examples might include the date when the team will come back together to determine the need for extended school year services or to decide if the specially designed instructional strategies are an educational benefit to the student. This needs to occur prior to the IEP expiration of 364 days to provide time for review and documentation so that the new IEP will be completed and in effect within the timeline. If yes is selected for age 14, Section 5, Post-Secondary Transition, will be added to the form. If yes is selected for is the child in preschool, preschool components will be added to this form. If during the duration of the IEP, the district needs to amend any section of the IEP, this information would be captured at the bottom of the page as well. There is a new addition to this section for participants to initial if any changes are made to the IEP by way of an amendment. The district of residence is the school or district where the student's parents or guardians reside, which is responsible for ensuring that an IEP is developed and implemented. The district of service is the school district that is responsible for implementing the services contained within the IEP. Districts of residence that have students who are educated outside their district must maintain communication with the district of service in order to ensure compliance and accurate implementation of the IEP. Community schools are the district of residence. In the case when a community school places a child in a separate facility for their academic and/or functional services, the community school remains the DOR and continues to be responsible for the education of that child. The new IEP form provides rollovers throughout to provide additional information that will assist districts to complete the form. Section 1 of the IEP asks for future planning. Parents, teachers, and students provide input on the student's long-term goals and interests. This input is recorded through a statement or short paragraph in the future planning section. Section 2 addresses special instructional factors. While these checkboxes might seem overly simplistic, it is important to remember that if the IEP team indicates any area as yes, it must be addressed in the IEP. Section 3 contains the student's profile. The IEP team provides background information on the student. Information might include statewide assessment data, data collected through a Reading Improvement and Monitoring Plan, a RIMP, if applicable, and other information about the student that the team thinks is necessary and important for all parties involved in the IEP to know. The IEP team should consider strengths of the student, areas of concern, and instructional strategies that have been successful. Do not cut and paste all the assessment data found in the ETR. Only include relevant academic or behavioral information that may have an impact on the student's academic and/or functional performance. Keep in mind that the language must be understandable to parents and all team members involved. Extended school year services move to Section 4 of the IEP and must be considered for each goal. Extended school year services may happen at any time the school is not in session. Extended school year services are provided beyond the normal school year of the district, which includes both the days of the school year and the hours of the school day. Extended school year services are not the same as summer school, compensatory services, or enrichment programs. The IEP team should consider extended school year services to prevent significant regression of skills or knowledge retained by the child, so as to seriously impede the child's progress towards their educational goals, and whether extended school year services are necessary to avoid something more than adequately recoupable regression of skills or knowledge. The team needs to determine whether the time the student will need to relearn the skills lost is excessive, particularly compared to the time it takes non-disabled students to regain skills lost during a school break. The IEP team may want to collect further data and reconvene later in the school year to determine if extended school year services are needed. The team would then enter the date on the IEP of when it plans to reconvene to make the determination based upon data collected. To access IEP Part 5, Post-Secondary Transition, click Yes to one of the questions on the IEP cover page. Will the child be 14 years of age before the end of this IEP? Or is the child younger than 14 years of age but has transition and post-secondary goal information? In Ohio, all elements for secondary transition planning must be included within the IEP that is in effect when the child turns 14. The IEP transition plan elements can be completed before age 14 if the IEP team determines it to be necessary for the student. When preparing for the meeting at which this IEP will be drafted, school personnel must invite the student. There is no exception to this requirement. In fact, the student must be invited to every IEP meeting with secondary transition is discussed, regardless of age and disability category. Notify the parents of the following. The purpose of the meeting will be the consideration for post-secondary goals and transition services for the child. The district has invited the child to attend the meeting and any other outside representative that will be invited. Remember, the student's parents must consent before any outside agency representative can be invited to this meeting. The post-secondary transition planning section of the IEP has been considerably reorganized. However, the majority of the components remain the same from the previous IEP form. Here you will see the layout of Section 5, Post-Secondary Transition. As always, a post-secondary goal must be written in the area of education, training, employment, and, if assessment data supports a need, independent living. Please note the revision of the wording in the employment goal to competitive integrated employment. The Ohio operating standards for the education of children with disabilities indicate that competitive integrated employment should be the first consideration for all individuals, including those with the most significant disabilities. As such, IEP transition plans must reflect this employment outcome. There must be evidence that each measurable post-secondary goal is based on age-appropriate transition assessment, or AATA data. To illustrate the importance of this connection, AATA is now documented directly under each post-secondary goal. This means that AATA data related to the education training goal is written in the education training area on the form, and so on. The student's course of study and annual goals from Section 6 of the IEP are included here. At minimum, the IEP must include at least one transition service that addresses each post-secondary goal. A new element on the form is the type of evidence that will be used to indicate the transition services has been completed. The anticipated target date on which the student will graduate is entered at the end of Section 5. The student's graduation date is based upon the specific needs of the student, not necessarily the date based on an age of the student. A new form, OP6B, Transition Progress Report, was created. The form is available on ODE's website with the other required and optional forms. The report is to be completed and distributed as frequently as the IEP progress report. Include the reporting period, for instance, first quarter or second semester, that is covered within the report and the date that the report is completed. List the transition services and activities from Section 5 of the IEP. The transition services and activities might be pre-populated into the report in some dynamic versions of the IEP form. Be sure to summarize the outcome of the transition services and activities at the time of the reporting period. Finally, indicate the status towards the completion of the transition services and activities. Have they started? Are they in progress? Has it been completed? The statement of present levels of performance should be written in language understandable to all, including the parent, and contain sufficient information to establish a baseline from which each annual goal is developed. It must indicate the child's current academic and functional levels compared to expected grade level standards in order to provide a frame of reference. Some examples might be classroom-based measures, functional scores, or behavioral actions. When writing about a student's present level of performance, districts should be sure that the focus is on current and specific academic and behavioral performance of the student. All performance levels must be described in measurable terms of growth. When data points are used, it is important that the data points selected and presented are related directly to the area or areas of need.